I was watching some stuff about quantum physics or something. You know, those things that always try to give you some idea of how things work, uh, and it's like so dadgum difficult to understand. My dad's a physicist, or was a physicist. He's died several years ago. Um, but the thing is that we couldn't like really talk because I'm a computer programmer and he's a physicist, and physicists and computer programmers don't mix very well because physicists don't really understand computers. Um, they have as much. Most physicists don't like computers, and that's the reason why the computer language Fortran exists. Is so that physicists can turn their formulas into computer programs, and That's what Fortran stands for: formula translation. That's where it comes from. And COBOL was created about the same time, and that's common business language. COBOL, that's for business people. COBOL was designed for. And Pascal, I don't know, was really just designed to teach people how to program. It wasn't really designed to be a working functional language, though somebody tried to turn it into one. Um, that's the way a lot of those languages are. But anyhow, I was uh, learning about quantum physics and Einstein's theories and all that stuff. And Einstein was the I've kind of thought about his stuff, and I've been thinking, if you went the speed of light, um, which you can't, I don't believe anybody can go. I don't believe matter can be, solid matter can be thrusted through the universe at the speed of light. I would think it would break up, and this is my belief: is that solid matter is held together. Um, has a It's held together by its attraction, by all the atoms' attractions to each other. But the only thing that can move the speed of light is subatomic particles. And so the atoms themselves don't actually move the speed of light. It's the particles, the subatomic particles, that move the speed of light. And what you're really seeing is the effects, the energy that gets transmitted onto your eye. So electrons, um, and the reason why I think this, and I'm not a physicist, so I don't really know, but neither was Einstein. He just ended up being there. He was a patent clerk, and people say, this guy's a patent clerk. He's not even a physicist. How can he even talk to us, as physicists and stuff, and change our views? But in fact, he did, and then he talked about quantum stuff. So maybe the thing was is that Einstein got into physics by thinking through things just a different way, um, visually, or just developing a new way of thinking about things. He also said his brain was different, and in the videos I've seen on YouTube, they've described that he had things that people didn't have normally in their brains, and he had a lot of white matter. Um, and I've heard that gray matter is what you start out with, and if you have too much gray matter, then it's usually a result of your brain not fully developing. And so teenagers that have taken drugs and stuff will end up with more gray matter, and it's on the edges of the brain. They can actually see it, and so you're not able to think. You have they said people who do drugs, like, you know will, if children do drugs like, marijuana or heroin or anything like that, it it hinders the development of the brain, and so it never fully develops, and so you end up with more gray matter than the white matter. And the white matter is, I guess, you know, the better, the fully developed part of the brain. Anyhow, I don't know what I have. I've I've got an addict's brain, and so I probably have a lot of gray matter. I don't know. Maybe I make use of some of that. But the thing is that I believe that if you move the speed of light, you would disintegrate, and it's possibly the case that solid matter can't move the speed of light. Only subatomic particles can move the speed of light, and so electrons. And when an electron moves, when an electron or when particles move, they since they don't, they have very little mass. Since they have very little mass, they don't travel in a straight way. They travel based upon the current state of the mass that's around them, and so they will, depending upon the mass that's local to them, they will go one way or another. And the experience, the way that they do the math for quantum physics is that the particles aren't represented as particles but are represented as waves, and the waves, and then if you have a slit in a wall and you send your particles out, they're going to appear on the back wall as a set of lines, and with the solid set in the center, and more diminished lines on the outer, and these waveforms. That's how they find the particle. They don't find it. When the particles travel, they find them layered up like that, and that's probably because they don't have a significant mass, so they don't, as they're traveling through space, or whatever material you're going through, they're if they're going through a material, then the mass is local and it's going to behave more predictably. But if it's not going through a material, it is going to be less predictable, because the mass, the forces that are acting on it. Because they said when the particle goes through a barrier, it diminishes, its behavior diminishes exponentially, and it'll come out on the other end, but it'll be reduced. So that'd be like a sound going through a wall. You hear it muffled on the other end. You don't hear the sound at full amplitude, and you don't hear it clearly. The wall absorbs some of the frequencies, high frequencies, and you hear the lower frequencies, or the higher frequencies get filtered out, and what you get is you get the stuff that resonates at a lower frequency. And that's probably what also happens with light. As it passes through a material, it diminishes its amplitude, and possibly it's the amount of energy, the amount of force or whatever that gets absorbed. The particles, as they're going through the material, are less likely. They may have a tendency to want to stay in the material rather than to go through. So it's kind of like a bullet hitting a wall. It's going to lose some of its momentum, it's going to lose some of its velocity going through the wall, because it's going to get absorbed. The materials are going to absorb its energy, and it's going to lose its speed. And so the particles may be attracted more to the stuff that's in the wall, um, and not end up on the other end. And so it's possible that the I guess if there was a hole in a wall, then the particles probably wouldn't be attracted by things, you know. But the thing they were saying is that when the particles still are, when you have a particle, it's a particle, but whenever it's traveling, it's a waveform. And that may be that the behavior of the particle is not predictable. And because that unpredictability, because there's an unpredictability of the particle, it's possible that you can only represent it by probability. You can't represent it by, because it doesn't behave um, consistently. It's consistent with probability, but it's not consistent with. It's not consistent like solid matter is, or matter above the atomic level. It's consistent. It's because the particles don't hold enough mass, and that's probably the reason why there's a lot of space between the atoms. Is that what's holding them together is their um, is probably the strength of that's holding atoms together is not strong enough to reduce the space between them. Um, so it's probably the closest they can ever get to each other. Um, but there's enough mass there that to keep them attracted to each other. Then so the density of the mass determines the amount of attraction. And what causes that? What is magnetism? What is gravity? And that's the question I have in my head: is what is gravity? What is the magnetism? What causes that? And it must be something that's, I mean, it probably still represents a solid of some sort at the level, but it gets confused because it's going a lot faster. It probably could be that when things are going really fast, they've got to have a lot of space between. They have to have a lot of space to avoid collisions, um, to reduce the chance for a collision. Um, and it's possible that the stuff that keeps them together is, yeah, well, I don't understand physics, so what I'm really good at is I'm really good at holding stuff in my brain, and and just thinking creatively. That's always been what I'm really good at. I can see, if I understand things well enough how they work, then I'm fairly good at kind of hacking things to do stuff. That's what I'm really good at, and I'm just a hacker by nature. I'm always trying to figure out how things work, or I'm trying to figure out how I can get things to work uh, to my end. Um, I try to manipulate things to work in the fashion that I want them to work. And ever since a kid, I've always been making stuff. And that's just the nature of an engineer. That's what engineers do. Is they take the physicists discover stuff, and the engineers take the stuff that the physicists discover, and they make technology out of it. They make it they make stuff from what the physicists find out, and chemical engineers do the same thing, but for chemicals. For what the chemists find out, I would expect that the chemical engineer engineers stuff based upon the behavior of chemicals. You know, and a biochemist does the same thing with chemical biology and chemistry, and you know manipulation of organisms and stuff. So engineers, architects are kind of engineers. They're engineers of buildings, of materials, and then you have mechanical engineers, which are people that work on cars and airplanes and stuff. So we're all just hacking something different.